Hey, welcome to God's Glory and Men's Real Stories. So glad you could join us on another episode of Men's Stories and Conversations. Whether this be your first time or whether you've been listening since the beginning, I'd like to welcome you all. I hope that you can truly get comfortable, sit back, and find a safe space to sit down and listen with us all. Just imagine yourself sitting with this community that cares about you in hopes that you can feel God's love, but also see God's glory in men's real stories. So on this episode, I have another special guest as always, and I'm so glad to bring men to sit down with me in hopes that we can truly be able to connect to their stories, process different things they're going through in life. Today I had a lot hit my mind as I was pondering a situation that happened in the news today with a young man who forfeited his life in an attempt to be able to just get away from maybe the pain that he was carrying, some of the things that he was processing in life, maybe some of the things that he just didn't feel like he could face. And so I've understood how important this podcast is to men as they go about their life, not knowing the struggles men go through on a daily basis. So as always, when I say that I hope that you can find a safe space here, I know that you may not be able to sit here in this room with us, but I hope that you can feel comfortable sitting back and recognizing that as men, we're not moving or walking through life as perfect men. We're moving through life really trying to tackle the day-to-day things, being totally imperfect, being flawed as we all are, but trying to do and be the best man we can be, trying to really seek God's direction in our lives as we try to move through the daily struggles that we carry and the things that we go through that really try to trip us up in life. And so, on today's podcast, I met this young man when I was in the mountains on a journey, or I guess I would say trying to find God's direction for my life. And both me and this young guy, we were both on the same path, walking the same path, seeking God's direction in our lives, seeking the direction in so many of our struggles that we were going through, both having different struggles, but a lot of similarities and a lot of the past we had gone in different things. So on today's episode, I'd like to welcome my brother, Mike Davis, to the show. Hey man, so glad you could join me today.
Hey, I'm glad to be here, Robert. It's been awesome. I've been waiting, couple months for this?
Yeah. So, no, we've been talking about this for a while. We've really been trying to lock down some time, and you came all the way down from the mountains just to sit down with me.
Dude, and this studio is pretty impressive. I gotta say.
Hey, I appreciate that, man. Not too many people have actually been in here except for the people I've sat down with. So no, it's just awesome that you could actually join me here. I know I'm prepping or preparing to start to do a lot of my podcast episodes remotely, but I love to sit down across from somebody just to have like a truly intimate conversation, because it creates a space where it's like we can sit here and just kind of like vibe and just really get a conversation down as if nobody's here. It creates a space where we can feel comfortable just talking about whatever, and it's natural because we sit across from each other, right?
Yeah, and I do a lot of my podcasting stuff remote, which you still get that interaction. Like there's people I'll like have on my show, and we'll stop recording and we'll talk for an hour or two after, just talking about whatever, talking about sports, wrestling, life.
Well, hold on. Let's start over. How about you tell everybody about yourself first, because so they know who you are, just so they can connect the dots on what you're even talking about right now. So go ahead and give them a little blip about you. Who are you?
Yeah, so I'm Michael Davis. I grew up in Boomer, North Carolina, and you know me as Boomer. So
right.
Boomer, Michael, it's kind of weird figuring out how to introduce myself. And went to Appalachian State, graduated with a broadcasting degree. I'm working at a camp right now that we met at.
Right.
Mission Uprising had been at the camp.
Right.
And on top of doing camp right now, I'm also host of a sports talk radio show and also a host of a professional wrestling podcast. Love my sports, love my wrestling, and love talking.
So. Okay, awesome. Well, that's what we came to do today. We came to sit down and really talk about things. Maybe not so much sports, maybe not so much wrestling, because that's not really my world when it comes to, I probably stopped watching wrestling after an era died of wrestlers like, I was just talking about the Ultimate Warrior the other day, wrestlers like Ricky Steamboat, like Roddy Piper, the Hulk Hogan, like guys like that after. And I think that, and the fact that, people kept trying to pollute my mind with the idea that, hey, that's not real. It's really good acting, right? And I was like, no way. Like, that's just real as like, and I'll never forget that video that time where a broadcaster or a newscaster said, but this is all fake, right? And the guy started smacking him around. I was like, does that feel fake? And it was like, I knew it was real. Exactly. And like, right?
It's kind of cool because, like, I know we're going to talk a lot more than just wrestling, because reason I like wrestling is the story. And I feel like I can relate to the wrestlers based on the story they're telling in the ring, on the microphone, over a course of a time frame where they're in a rivalry with someone. And I feel like we as humans love stories. We love telling stories. We love listening to stories because that's how we connect to people.
Right. No, that's real good. Well, look, you've already kicked it off, because that's exactly what we're here to do today. We're here to like talk about your story, talk about like just things that have gone on in your life, just hear about your testimonies of how God has seen you through things, and understand like what's it like, in your world of moving through life and the things that you see nowadays, or just, talk about like where you feel like life is taking you in so many different places, and what you're doing in those seasons of your life. So I would jump in just to say, like, where, I know you're kind of bridging off into like what you're doing nowadays. What's life look like nowadays for you?
Wow. So I guess I kind of got to start out with how I got to this point, right?
Yeah, no, you can take it from wherever you want to go.
Yeah, because it's pretty complicated to see. Like, I was sitting down with my best friend the other day and like kind of talking through this. I'm like, man, this is weird how God's lined up everything in life. Because when you opened up the show and talked about the guy who had, maybe committed suicide.
Right. Well, he did commit suicide. I don't want to speculate too much into his life, but yeah, it was definitely broken to all of us that a guy that a lot of people follow, a lot of people have truly probably found a lot of happiness and joy in, a guy named Stephen Boss, I believe it was. He was from the Ellen Show. He just kind of, and of course, knowing we know that it was broken to us that he committed suicide. Don't know, can't speculate on anything else or what happened, but yeah.
Wow. Because I've been busy today and didn't even like know about that story until I came over to the house and you were talking about it. I was like, wow. But that, in all honesty, I feel like a lot of guys and a lot of girls too have gotten to a point in that life where you're questioning or you're contemplating that decision of, is life worth it? Are the struggles I'm having right now, are they going to pass? And that's where I really got into like 8th grade, which was a really difficult time for me. And 8th grade, I went for the football team. I broke my collarbone, and 8th grade, I was like really pulled away from the friends I'd made in previous grades. And there was a point where I was like, I'm thinking about it. And I remember there was a moment when we were coming back home from school. It was me, my dad, my brother, and we live on a dirt road, and we have a driveway, and it's pretty steep. So we're at the bottom of the driveway, and Dad randomly like asked the question, have you ever thought about suicide? And I was just honest with him, and I said, yeah. And like those moments where the air leaves the room, like it was that moment. And I'll never forget like getting up there, parking, and I was the first one out of the car after we sat in just silence for like a couple minutes, and opened the door, and I see like my brother in the backseat bawling. And that was a decision, or that was a conversation that led to the decision to pull me and my brother from public school, go into homeschool. And a lot of people ask me, do you regret not having the high school experience like everybody else? I'm like, well, I see where God led me through that, because through that, I'd broken my collarbone in football, missed the whole season, broke it before the first game, which really stinks. And I was like wanting to play sports. My mom found a flag football league through a church. I was aged out, but my brother could play. which led to us getting back into church, which led me to attend a few Sundays. And pastor used a baseball analogy. I was like, wow, that really resonated with me. I want to do this Christian life. And from there, met a family at church who introduced me to the camp I work at right now. And they're like, they need more Christian counselors, particularly like male Christian counselors. And I was like, well, that's me. I've never been to a summer camp before. I mean, let's try it. Went there for staff training. Almost quit during staff training before any kids got there.
Wait, why is that?
Right. I was feeling like it wasn't for me, right? I come into this environment where a lot of people know each other already. People are very extrovert. I don't know if you would imagine this, but I was very introverted. I was very to myself. First day of staff training, I see people, counselors, like dancing on the tables in the dining hall. I'm like, what's going on here? I don't know this world at all. And I almost quit. And I'm so glad I didn't, because I met my best friend there, met my best friend on the first day of camp. And, was going through a different situation that summer during staff training. And he had like pulled me aside and like knew I wasn't okay and prayed with me. And I remember sitting outside the cabin by myself, and I'm like, well, God, I don't know why you have me here, but let's do it. And, once I really like gave that to God, man, I saw him work so much during that summer. Got to see a kid get saved, 2 in the same night, actually, having that conversation with them. And they've come back each summer and can't wait to see me. And now 6 years later, I feel like my time there is coming to a close, if not have come to a close, because the broadcasting stuff's picking up. I really feel content, and I hope I've had conversations with my boss, so it's okay if this gets on air. But I've had conversations with my boss of like, I love camp and I'd love to be here. I haven't applied anywhere, and she's like, why haven't you? I'm like, well, I mean, you're right. So at this point in my life, you ask where my direction is right now. It's kind of figuring out like where God has me, trying to figure out what's the next step to take, and having like the courage to take that next step, because that's where I am right now. It's very, very scary to take that next step, not knowing where you're going to be, where you're like, am I going to mess up? Am I going to go on this wrong path that God doesn't want me on? Like, those are the decisions and the questions running through my head right now that I'm wrestling with. No pun intended.
Gotcha. Gotcha. No, okay. No, I can totally understand that. Do you feel like in this season right now, do you feel pulled at, or do you feel like he's kind of trying to lead you in any direction? Like maybe he's pushing you in a certain direction that you're kind of just like, yeah, no, you're going to have to send me a bigger sign than that? Or do you feel like maybe like life is kind of putting you in a place where I'm so comfortable, I've been doing this so long, I know I'm being led away from this, but I don't feel like, or is it just that I don't feel like I'm being led in any specific direction, so I'm just kind of comfortable here for now, which is why you said you hadn't applied anywhere else or looked at anything else? Yeah,
I'm not too sure. And I feel like definitely over the last, I would say 6 months or so, I've had the pull of like, okay, your time's coming to a close. Like, I remember being in, I was kind of in a cabin, which for the 6 summers I've been there, 4 of them were a cabin counselor. I'm with the kids all day, every day, running activities with them, getting them up in the morning, getting them to sleep at night, doing devos in the cabins. And the last 2 summers, mainly I've been program assistant, making sure all the staff are equipped and trained for those areas, making sure they have what all they need, helping out with any other stuff that needs to go on at camp. And the last week of the summer, I was actually in a cabin, kind of, over like leadership area. And my best friend had actually come back from his firefighting job, the one I met at the camp my first summer. Okay. And so we were kind of together that last week, and it was like an angel tree week. So it was like kids of like incarcerated parents. It was the first time we had ever done that at camp, like a full summer week camp. And I remember leaving that week and I was like, this could be it. But if it is, like, I'm more than content with it. Because I had struggled a few weeks before that and almost asked for that week off. And I'm really glad I didn't, because after that, I felt like so much peace. And then when it's summer's not happening, there's fall conference and spring conference. And we just host groups like Mission Uprising, like school groups, everything. And I remember, like, after each one, I was like, okay, I'm like, each one I felt like I have a little bit more to do, but I feel content with the work I did for that specific group.
Right.
And, you know, just the last couple groups, I mean, and we'll touch on a little bit more, but Winter Camp was this past weekend from when we were recording this. And I was in a cabin with kids. My best friend came back. He had a few days off from his firefighting job. And I left that Sunday and was like, yeah, I have peace. Like, I feel like that chapter of my life is closed. Not saying I won't be there 3 more months if God wants me there 3 more months or 3 more years, but I feel that pull away right now.
So tell me this, what opened the door for you to kind of get into the, I guess, into the podcasting? Like, when did that door open, and like how did that opportunity even present itself?
Yeah. So when I was homeschooled, I had a lot of time on my hands. I got my work done in like 2 hours, and I would just watch sports radio. So I honestly liked Colin Cowherd and the stuff he was doing. He was originally on ESPN, and I was like, okay, I could see myself doing that, talking sports for 2-3 hours a day. I'd like to do that. And so ended up going to a community college and then transferring to App State for my broadcasting degree. And graduated during COVID, so it wasn't the most opportune time to graduate, obviously.
Right.
And I was like, okay, nobody's hiring. That's what led me into camp. And I honestly started to think that the broadcasting thing had passed me by, which is weird to say in like your like early mid-20s.
Right.
But I had a friend that I graduated with. He's like, hey man, I'd really like to have you on my show just as a panelist, if you can come on like 15 minutes and talk football. I was like, I'll do that. Let me check with the boss, see if that's okay. And she was like, yeah, that's more than okay. And he really liked me on his show. He invited me back a few times. And, you know, there was this one Friday, and it was like prime time. Like, you want that time slot on Fridays for the radio station. He contacted me like Thursday night. He's like, hey man, I don't want to cancel the show, but I can't host it. Would you be willing to guest host it? And I thought it was a little weird because usually he cancels it. And I was like, okay, I mean, sure, why not? I have nothing better to do, right?
Right.
And we go in this virtual room, and we're about to go on air, and the producer, Desmond Johnson, great producer, great boss. He was like, did Brett tell you? I'm like, no, what? He's like, oh, this is your audition. And we go live. So I don't have time to think about like, oh my gosh, this is is something I fell in my lap. And all of a sudden afterwards, he calls me up. He's like, that was great. That was awesome. I'd like to offer you your own radio show starting in August. And so it wasn't anything I applied for. It honestly fell in my lap. And
so I'm just curious, and I've learned, I mean, I just was recently talking about how like sometimes doors open in our lives in certain ways sometimes that we don't expect it. We don't ever see it coming. And it's not like you applied for that position and you were like, oh, well, yeah, you know, I'm hoping to get this position at this show, so maybe I can move away from the camp. But it was almost like that door just opened up for you. And I'm learning in this season right now how God opens doors in ways that we're just kind of like, whoa, I didn't see that coming. But more importantly, a lot of times we look at that door opening as a blessing in our life. Like, well, maybe he was blessing me with another opportunity. And recently I was watching Transformation. I don't know if you watch Transformation Church. And I was watching how Travis Green was on there.
I just watched that.
Did you okay, so did you see that? Okay. Yeah. So like the way he broke that down, where he was like, God doesn't open doors for us.
God opens doors for his glory.
Yes. And I was like, yo, like, okay, so wait a minute. Mind blown. So all this time I'm thinking that I'm waiting for God to open doors for us in certain areas of our life as a blessing. But he really opens doors so that he can be in the room, so that he can be a part of the production, so he can be part of that platform. And so I'm in a season now where I'm looking at it from a standpoint of like, so that makes so much sense, because when he opens doors for us, he wants to see if we'll give him the glory for the doors he's opened. He wants to see if we'll bring him into that platform and onto that stage with us, or into that boardroom, or into that office with us. And so I love how I look at things now from like how you were describing, like, okay, well, that door open. I didn't see that all of a sudden. I was sitting there just covering for somebody. And the next thing I know, I had my own show. And it's almost like, okay, so in the midst of that, like, we sometimes overlook it, and we just kind of maybe sometimes think like, wow, I was really good. Like, I must have been good enough to land this. And so we start to give ourselves kudos like, yo, I killed that. But like, sometimes we have to stop and say, okay, God, wait a minute. Why did you open this door for me? Like, what was your plan in opening this door for me at this moment when I feel like you already had me over here at the camp?
Yeah.
And a lot of times I know we may not stop to think like, I wonder what that was all about. But like, have you felt like as you're feeling like you're closing the chapter on your job at the camp, that maybe you're being pulled more into the broadcasting area of your life?
I hope so. Because if that's not where it is, then I'm kind of more worried about, where God's calling me.
Right. So tell me where the worry. Okay, so you got to tell me where does the worry come from? No, like, because I noticed you said that you were, if it's not where God's calling you, then you're worried. So what produces the worry?
I mean, because obviously I studied broadcasting. I graduated with broadcasting, and the phrase comes into mind all the time, like, he doesn't, call the qualified, he qualifies the call.
Yeah,
and
I love that saying.
And that saying like rings true because, looking back at camp, right? Seeing how like God opened that door for his glory, like he put somebody who's very introverted, very quiet, never been to a camp before. All they wanted to do was share the gospel with kids. Like, that's all I wanted to do. It was like, my goal in that summer was, if one kid gets saved, it's all worth it. And that's why I had to come to when I was like sitting outside the cabin contemplating about quitting before kids ever got there.
Wow.
And to see, like, he gave me my best friend through that. He gave me several like very close friends through that. He allowed me to pour into kids, and two of the kids I was like you wouldn't expect would listen to your devos and everything. And going in, there's this one particular kid who was the first ever person I got to like lead to Christ. I mean, I didn't do it, but God allowed me to be there for that. And now he's come back in later summers. He's grown his faith so much that he spoke to the whole camp.
Wow.
Like 2 or 3 times, he's like, I really want to do Vespers, which is like in front of the whole camp. You're talking like 15, 20 minutes. I'm just like there trying not to cry in the back because of like what God was able to do. And if I just was like, no, I'm not up for this, I'm not qualified, I'm not good enough, it would be like, I mean, God would do it either way, but
right.
I wouldn't be able to experience that. So I know the worry's kind of crazy because I know God's going to be there. I know, like, just in my head, I have the head knowledge, like, God's going to be there.
Right,
I have the experiences of, like, okay, God's going to be there.
Right.
But,
well, no, I'm just glad you said it because, see, a lot of times people think that, like, if you're walking with God and if you're trusting him, then how do you worry? And I'm like, okay, but that doesn't change the feelings that we have. Like walking with God doesn't take away our feelings. We still worry. We still fear things. We still have a level of just emotions that come over us in different times. And a lot of times it's just a matter of like, that was the initial emotion. And sometimes we can dial it back and just kind of say, I am worried, God. Like, yeah, I do worry about this. And even in trusting you, sometimes the first thought is, like you said, I don't want to have come this far and gotten my degree in this, and maybe this not be your plan for me. And I just got to be like, I got a communications degree, and God, this is not your plan for me. And maybe not the way you see it. Like maybe it's kind of like you got a communications degree, you have a communications job, but it's preparation for the journey he wants to take you on, in some manner. And I don't know that for sure. I'm just kind of using that to like say that I've noticed that how people will think that we are where we're supposed to be. We think that like God opened this door for me to do this, but maybe that was a door opening because somebody else recognized your talents, but it wasn't, God gives us all gifts, but it wasn't where he was prepared, what he was preparing you for. Maybe it was just a step to see if you'll step into the uncomfort of that so that maybe he could take you on a different approach. But like, no, I guess expound upon that. Tell me more about that.
And I think the fear's always going to be there. I feel like the worry's always going to be there. Like in the back of my mind, I'm going to always fear that I'm not good enough. I always tell, one of my favorite devos in the cabin is, what's your biggest fear? And I always start to kind of break the ice between, because I usually have like the 6th, 7th, 8th graders. I have that age range, 11, 13-year-olds.
Right.
And I think that's why I struggled in middle school the way I did, with all the thoughts I had back then. So I could eventually go to camp and, minister to those kids. I feel like that's why I connect with them. And
because they're kind of having the same thoughts. They're kind of fighting those same thoughts of like give me an example, like some of the thoughts that you constantly, because I'm guessing you have to kind of be real with them or vulnerable with them about some of the things you're going through in order for them to kind of open up. Because are you dealing with boys or?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, and dealing with boys, a lot of times our thought process is that, I don't want to kind of like expose like what I'm going through or like how I'm feeling about things or like the things that are going through my mind, especially not at a Christian camp, right? And so like explain kind of how that ice breaking goes and how you open up the door for them to be able to be vulnerable.
Yeah, you can't expect people to be vulnerable with you if you're not vulnerable in return. Because at least in the counselor role, your job is to take care of those kids. Like their parents drop off their kids, their most prized possessions with you at the beginning of the week, and expect at the end of the week when they pick them up, 1, they're alive, they're okay, and 2, they had the best weekend experience of their life. And I don't take that lightly. And so one of the big things is Camp Harrison is where I've been working. It's a very relationship-based camp. That's why I like it. It's a very relationship-based, Christian-based camp where you don't have to be Christian to come. And I love that because I hate the church camps. Like, you have to be affiliated with a certain church to come and everything. Like, you're expected to be
Your relationship
Christian.
has to be a certain way with God and all these different things of like, we only want to reach the Christian kids instead of we want to reach the world, the kids who are walking with God, and we'll leave out the ones that aren't. It's like, okay, how else do you reach them if you don't actually invite them?
And so when the kids come, like, I've noticed this maybe just the last 2 or 3 years. They think you're the coolest person in the world. They're like, you work at a camp and you get to run around and play games and you're like a big brother or like you're a mentor for them. And so every word you say holds so much weight. And I wish, and there's people who do, but I wish like everyone understood that, whether you're in a camping world or whether you're in the world. Like when you're talking to the youth, every word you have has weight to it. And that shouldn't be taken lightly. So whenever I sit down with them and I'd be like, okay, we're going to talk about our biggest fears tonight. And I'm going to say, well, my 2 are the fear of failure. I mean, I don't like to fail. I don't like to disappoint people. And the fear of the unknown. Like, that's why this job search is like freezing me in panic right now. And by being vulnerable with that and, going around the room, we usually do this at the beginning of the week, either on Sunday or Monday night, and being like, okay, sit them down and they say all their fears. I'm like, okay, some of you like had different fears, but there were several of you who had the same fears, whether that's a fear of heights or, fear of losing a loved one. Like, we all carry this fear in us. Like it, and that's the thing is fear and worry isn't just me. Like, it isn't just my problem. everyone in the world deals with it in some degree or variety. So being able to unite that and having the platform, which is why I love why you're doing this podcast, is being vulnerable enough to say, hey, I'm struggling with that. I'm going through that too. Like, it empowers us, it empowers me hearing some of the podcasts you've dropped where I'm like, okay, I mean, if this person is going through it and he's trying and he's had some success in that area, then maybe I can too.
Right.
And being able to tell kids that when they're in a middle school, 6th, 7th, 8th, sometimes 9th grade, you know, like, hey, this guy you're looking up to right now, I'm struggling right now. And you're never going to go through life without a struggle, but it's how you overcome it and how you progress forward to overcome that.
Knowing that our struggles are going to always be there. It's not like they go away or life is an ongoing struggle. The question is, how are you going to struggle with it? What are you going to do with your struggles? Are you going to try to man them and strengthen them, man them with your own strength? Or are you going to tap into like what God has for you, knowing that he doesn't want you to do this alone? More importantly, a lot of what we try to accomplish on our own, under our own strength, sometimes we do find ourselves failing. We do find ourselves having to start over, and not that we should necessarily. I mean, I don't know. I'm still trying to really understand like the understand, or I guess the idea of failure, and that on one hand we always hear you have to fail to succeed. Failure is a part of life. And if we fear failure or rejection, a lot of times it keeps us, I guess, paralyzed to comfort of like, I'll just stay here because if I decide to move forward, then I could fail, and I don't want failure. And that like, think about it. You deal with the thought of failure in relationships, jobs, any approach. I mean, I have dealt with the idea of an area of failure of worrying about rejection, of worrying about maybe people I reach out to or different things, whether I'm working to get something done for the podcast or whatever. It's like, okay, am I going to deal with the failure of this, in that if they don't want to help or if they don't want to be a part of it or whatever the case may be, will that make me kind of just like crawl back in and not want to deal with it? And so, no, I like how you brought that up, because I think we all struggle with that, no matter how much we think that like, oh yeah, I got this, or I'm confident in these areas. But there's always like an area of our life where we're kind of just like, yeah, but like, yeah, I kind of shy away in that area. Like, I'm not comfortable in that area. Like, that's an area that I don't like to face and look myself in the mirror in, because I have to deal with the fact that is a fear of mine, and I'm not supposed to be fearful, but you do have those moments where you have to remind yourself, like, God doesn't give me a spirit of fear, but a power, love, and a sound mind, and encourage yourself to like face the fear that attacks you in certain areas of your life just at the spur of the moment. Yeah, I mean, it's just like I said, that's a constant struggle of mine as well, and that. Yeah, it's just like fear will paralyze you. It'll hold you in place. So as you continue on in your journey now, like you said, kind of in like the in-between stage, in the middle of trying to decide whether you're going to stay, at the camp, whether that's where you feel you're called, or whether you're wanting to move on. And I know we had previously even talked about like just even making a move, even from where you're currently living to maybe another place or something like that. And all of those are like, that's not a little small idea. I mean, that's like a huge,
it's a big step.
Yeah, it is. And so, I'm just curious, what are some of the difficulties you're having with that? What goes through your mind day to day when you kind of like think on where you're going, or where you're pulled to, I guess I would say?
Yeah, so I haven't found a job where I would be able to be like, okay, that's the one, right? Mm-hmm. And kind of being just afraid, like fear of rejection. I applied to one school, App State Rural Nears, and got in. So I was like, okay, I'm not applying anywhere else. I didn't apply to schools that I didn't think I would get into. I was like, okay. And this was the approach I had told myself at the time. I'm like, okay, I'm going to apply a place. And if God wants me there, I'll be accepted. If not, I'll apply to the next place. And, I did that because A, I trusted God. But B, I think I also was like, man, I'm not going to apply to Duke. I'm not going to apply to a school like that where it's like, okay, there I'm probably getting rejected.
So you had already kind of like closed the box, like to say, you know what, I think I would get rejected because, well, now, why did you feel like you would be rejected?
I wasn't smart enough. I was homeschooled. Like, who wants a homeschooled kid? I mean, I'd been telling myself all this, like, your grades aren't good enough. And even if you had gotten into Duke and first semester you're flunking out. Like, so I even thought that way about app. So I didn't even go straight from homeschool to app. I went from homeschool to Wilkes Community College. So I did community college for 2.5 years, and then I transferred to app. So I was like very strategic in a way of making sure I could handle going back into a classroom setting.
Right.
Making sure I didn't like relapse or reset myself back to how I was in middle school.
Right.
Before I went to the university. But, I mean,
it's funny because, I was convicted the same way with that, with the thoughts of like, I'm just going to do what I think is like, I think I can accomplish this. You know what I'm saying? And like, I'm not going to reach any higher because, then I'm just pushing it. Like Rob, stay in the safe zone. It's almost like you want to stay in this safe zone or like, no, it won't jump that high. But like, I think God will allow me to maybe be here with it. You know what I'm saying? And I was convicted lately, man, with a thought where I was like, sometimes we ask God to meet us, right? And like we meet us and help us in certain areas of our life, right? But then we put a box on what he can do for us. We put him in a box to say, okay, but I'm only going to apply here, or I'm not going to step out in faith. I'm going to step out as far as I think I can step. Like I can see that step. I'm not going to step any further. And so we kind of put him in a box of saying, like, I know I'm trusting you, but like, I'm going to try to keep you in this box, and I'm not going to step in faith to say, I'm going to try it anyway. I'm going to go for it anyway. I'm going to reach out to this person anyway. I'm going to shoot for this anyway and see what happens. And I had to sit back with it. Me and my son, we were talking, and I was like, because of my own fear, I don't take steps and I don't approach doors that God may have already opened for me. He may have already worked it out for me, but I'm scared to approach the door because of my own fear of rejection. Right?
All right, we're hitting somewhere now.
Okay. All right, now I got him warmed up.
So that's been what I've been convicted about recently is like, because there's so many thoughts that come to my mind of not being enough. Like, so I'm just going to shrink myself down to size of what other people think I should be or what I think society thinks of me, but I haven't even given society a chance to like tell me that. Like, I've just rejected myself before I've been rejected. And for some reason, I feel like that feels better. But, and ever since that Mission Uprising weekend a couple months ago, like, I've just had several things, like, be hit and, like, line up in different conversations or different moments. Like, I left that weekend saying, like, I wanted God to speak to me, even if it was just a word or two or three. Like, I just wanted like God to show up, and by putting my phone away, by really focusing on what God spoke to me that weekend, it was like next step. Those were the two words. It was like next step. Like next step, just take a step. Like just take a step, and if 6 months from now I go back to Uprising and I'm still in the exact same place I was, at least I took a step. Like, at least I took the step and failed, but it's like, okay, you're willing to trust me. You're willing to obey me. And, a few weeks later, I'm at a wrestling convention, and, I meet this wrestler who actually has a video up on social media or YouTube where he talked about losing his mom. And thankfully I still have my mom, but I was like, wow, that touched me in a way of like, I gotta appreciate like people around me. I gotta appreciate my mom because my mom's like a rock star. She really is, and she doesn't get the credit that she deserves. And you know, I thanked him for it and took a picture and everything. And right before I leave his like table, his booth, he was like, I want to give you this, and he like gave me this bracelet. And
Oh, wow.
I was like, how much? He's like, oh no, I'm giving it to you. And he gave me a little pep talk, and on one side it says never give up, and the other side says dream big. And I've been wearing that, you know, for the last several weeks since he gave it to me. And every time I think about this conversation, every time I think about the conversation we had a few days ago over the phone, and I was like, well, dang it, Robert, you knew what to say. And every time it's like, okay, dream big. And I never want it to be like, okay, I'm putting this dream in the air and I'm trying to make it on my own. I'm trying to make it in my own power. I'm trying to do this because I was like, oh, it'd be cool. But dream big enough to like take that step for God to work. And again, if it's a failure in my own eyes, if I get rejected by a job, career, by a person, whatever, then at least I've taken that step and at least I've trusted God in that area.
That's real. Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah. I like that. And I think, you know, I think we're all on that journey sometimes of like that trust where like we're constantly having to trust him in new seasons where it's like we're stepping forward and we get comfortable and like, okay, like look what God did. And then a new season comes and it's like a fear sits in and it's like we forget what he did in that last season where we're starting all over again and we're just like, oh, but I got comfortable. Like, why are you calling me away from this? And it's like, yeah, but like the same faith that you had, the same trust that you had in that last season, don't forget about that because I need you to have that again in this season. And it's just, it's wild because even when you read in the Bible how every time that God called his people into other situations, he called them into other battles, he called them into other lands, it was almost like they forgot about the faith they had previously that got them where they are now. And we do the same thing because the fear of the unknown, the fear of I can't see the future in that. I can't see the step in that. Logically, it doesn't make sense. Why would I step over there? But it's like, it's almost like he's like, yeah, but because I called you to this, like I called you before. So, you know, don't question me. Have faith. Know that I'm here to prosper you. I'm here to bring you joy. So the question is, do you trust me? And that's a hard one.
It sounds so bad to say, no, not really. I mean, and that's why, like, I'm glad you said those two things, and particularly the Bible, because I'd listened to a message on Exodus, you know, Moses with the staff in his hand throws it on the ground, it becomes a snake, and God's trying to tell Moses, like, you're going to lead the people, like, you're going to be the spokesman, and Moses, all he can think about is, I'm not qualified for this, I'm not that. And with that, God's like, yeah, you gotta trust me. You just got to.
Right.
And it feels so bad when it's like, I can't trust you because here I am looking inwardly at myself of how I come up short in my own eyes.
That's good. That's so true right there though. That's so real. That yeah.
And with the comfort, I feel like I've gotten comfortable at camp. And when and this isn't like tooting my own horn because there's a lot of areas I can be better. And I'm like, this was the strongest, like, you know, full calendar year I've had at camp. Because there's been some times where it's been rocky. I haven't been happy with my performance. But, you know, back to the spring, I ended that eval and was like, I feel like I rocked it. Like, I feel like this was my best spring. And then the summer, I didn't even get an eval because I didn't feel like I needed one. Like, the bosses were busy. They were giving evals to everybody else. And I'm like, if you have something, tell me, but tell me in the day. Like, Don't wait till the very end. And they're like, you're doing great. Like, you're going above and beyond. Like, we don't have to worry about you. I'm like, that's awesome. And then the fall comes, and I'm like, I still feel the same way. I feel like I'm just building on, and I'm good at what I do. I enjoy what I do. Like, I love camp. I love when people come back and they already know you. They already recognize you, and they're like, Boomer! Because that's the name I got dubbed at camp. And really the only people who call me Michael are my parents, and I still use Michael for my broadcasting career.
Right.
And it just means so much to me to, like, brighten someone's day, and that they remember you and they want to come back to see you. Right. And I've gotten so comfortable with that. It helps kind of boost my confidence, I want to say ego, but it just makes me feel better about myself.
Well, tell me this. Are you, sometimes I think that, like we said, we know that what we're comfortable in, it can sometimes lead to us not truly moving in our calling sometimes in our comfort. But do you feel like you ever, like, even like check with God to say, all right, like, is this where you want me? Or, and I can say this for myself even too, sometimes we get so comfortable we're scared to ask God where he may be calling us to, because he might call us away from what we're so comfortable with. Do you ever feel like in asking him, he might tell you something that you may be like, okay, wait, no, I don't want to go there. I don't want to do that. Like, that's way too uncomfortable. That brings about fear immediately. That triggers me, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, that weighs on my mind a lot, because, I mean, if right now I'm comfortable, like right now I live at camp, I love working there. I'm good at what I do. I enjoy what I do. I enjoy the people I meet and work with, and I don't have to pay for housing. They provide that. I'm 10 minutes away from my parents. If they need anything, or if I need anything, I can go there. And outside of App, which is literally an hour from where I grew up, I mean, I've only known Boomer, North Carolina. I haven't known Charlotte. I haven't known Knoxville, Florida, Texas, like any of these places that I've thought about like moving to. Like, all of a sudden I'm like, I don't know anybody there, or, I'm going to have to make enough money to pay for rent, and also don't know how to cook. So I got to learn how to cook, because I can't eat out all the time.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, no, I get that. So, well, yeah. No, I totally understand. So basically, it's super comfortable where you're at.
It's right really comfortable. It's a good gig.
It is.
It's a good gig.
And it puts you in a perfect space where you're amongst, or you're right in where everybody is. Your family's right here. They're within touching distance. You're everything you know every turn. You know how to get from your house to your job with your eyes closed if you want it. You wouldn't be able to do that if you moved away. If you went to, it's almost like being called somewhere else, but saying, yeah, but I don't know there. And knowing that, yeah, he knows you don't know there. But it's
Robert, I took 3 wrong turns coming to your house, and I had the GPS on. Like, that's how bad it would be.
Okay. And you know what? So look at it this way. The beauty of it is that he knows that too. And he knows that, okay, so basically what you're saying is you can't do it without me, right?
Yeah.
So then in that case, then if you can't do it without me, I know you can't do it without me. And that's what I was hoping you would understand too. So you're going to need me to do this. You're not going to step away under your own strength. You're going to need me to pull you away. And sometimes he will pull us away from things that we're not recognizing his push. Like, hey, look, I need you to step away from that. Yeah, I'm not trying to hear that right now. I'm not trying to hear that. And then next thing you know, something yanks you away. You're like, okay. All right. I got it. I heard you. Like, yeah, they just let me go. Got it. I hear you now. Like, I shouldn't have waited till that, but like now you're making me uncomfortable in my comfortable space. So now I got to find comfort somewhere else. It's almost like the tree I was living under that gave me shade. You just killed the tree. So now I got to find shade somewhere else. In all of this, how has your mental health been?
Okay, we're going there. Thanks, Robert.
Yeah, no problem.
Can we cut the cameras now?
Absolutely not, man. This is important, man. You know how we started off this episode. That's important, man.
I overthink a lot. I really do. I overthink, and not rehashing what we've already been, like fear of the unknown, fear of the failure, fear of where I'll be in a month from now, 2 months, a year from now. And I feel like I worry. I don't want to self-diagnose that I have anxiety. Definitely stressed. And I feel like that's affected my sleep. And so there was a period this summer because I started to feel like, okay, I'm wrapping up my time at camp. Like, I couldn't see myself there for a seventh summer. If that's what God wants, like, I would be there in a heartbeat, right? Mm-hmm. Don't feel like that's where it is. If I'm wrong, I'll be there, right? But I don't want to be there just because I'm scared to step out and take the next step. But over the summer, there were like 3, maybe 4 weeks of, I haven't talked to a lot of people about this. There were about 3 to 4 weeks where I was having like really bad nightmares, and I was either having the nightmares or I wasn't sleeping because I was afraid I'd have the nightmares, and they had a common theme to it, and that messed me up because once your sleep goes, then your performance goes, then your mind goes, and if you're trying not to sleep, then your mind's wandering,
right?
And if you're sleeping and you have that nightmare, you wake up and your mind's wandering. And, thankfully I haven't had that theme of nightmares since, but sleep's something I've struggled with for, a few months now.
Right.
And, I'll have good days, I'll have bad days. And, I had that moment this weekend of, like, my mind racing as soon as I went to bed. Like, it was in a cabin, so usually I'll have like the TV on or I'll have something going so where my mind's not in silence because I'm kind of scared of that.
Right.
And that happened in the cabin because you can't have a TV in the cabin with a bunch of kids. And so my mind starts racing. But just like 30 minutes before that, my friend texts me and says, hey, I'm struggling. I feel like my mind's racing and everything. Talked to him through it. He went to bed. And now I'm like struggling with that.
Still up, right? Because you kind of poured into him a little bit, but you didn't have a way to pour back into yourself to deal with the struggle that you have that's similar to his.
And I feel like what it was like Satan or his demons like trying to get me off course, trying to take my mind off what God wanted from that weekend. Because 24 hours later, when I was going to bed, I look back and I'm like, okay. Like, I see where Satan was trying to get me off track and, like, focus on, the struggles I had over the summer or struggles with, my mental health. But I was like, you know what? He's trying to interrupt something God's going to do this weekend.
And think about it. I mean, like, you're not talking about anything different than, like, even things that we've read about before, like in the story of David, where he used to have to go and like play the harp for Saul when he used to be tormented at night and he couldn't get sleep. And sleep is so important to our mental health. That's one of the biggest forms of self-love, to make sure you provide yourself with the rest you need to be able to function, because a lot of times our bodies are running on E before our days are ending because the rest we need we're not getting, and so that's so important to like when I tell people you should pour back into yourself. Pouring back into yourself sometimes looks like rest. It looks like taking breaks. It looks like taking vacations. It looks like finding time, like you said you don't really like to sit with yourself in silence, right?
Yeah.
And so sometimes you have to have noise and different things, but a lot of times you have to try to find peace in the silence, because we distract ourselves with different things, like you said, noises and different things, to try to interrupt the silence that we're experiencing, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so like that's
I feel like sometimes I'm hurting myself by saying this. Like sometimes
you're not actually hurting yourself. You got to get it out.
Sometimes we can silence God's voice when like we put that stuff in mind. Because when you said that, I immediately thought to Mission Uprising, because I was like, I want as much distraction away as possible. Like I don't want my phone. I don't want TV. So I would go back to my house and try to sit and sleep without the TV on. I'd go and sit by myself without phone or any distractions. And that's where I saw like God talk to me a lot. Like I feel like when I am in silence, I have the opportunity for like Satan to like get in my mind and say, you're not enough, this, that, whatever. What if this goes wrong? What if that goes wrong?
Right.
And, you know, after fighting those, then like God can like start pouring in and like praying rather than finding an escape of something else.
Right. And you know what? I would agree with you 100% because it wasn't till I started doing meditation that I actually started to truly hear God's voice, because I had never really been interested in meditation. Really, honestly, I didn't know what it was. But as I got to understand how it was sitting with myself and listening to my breath, the same breath that God gave me to clear all the other noises, all the other thoughts, clear my mind completely, is almost like being able to reach up and take the clouds and just push them away and have clear skies. And in clearing my skies and clearing all the voices, all the thoughts, I was able to sit there and truly be able to focus on my breath without thoughts trying to impede my mind at that moment. And in that silence, you start to then be able to clearly hear that voice of God in the background, the one that's been behind everything that you weren't listening for because you were drowning it out with music. You were drowning it out with TV. You were drowning it out with social media, to where it's funny because, and I don't know if you've heard this before, we pray. I think Stephen Furtick said it. We pray sometimes, and then we go on about our lives, but we don't ever give God the space to actually to respond back.
Right.
And so we'll pray, and then we'll jump in the car, turn the music on, go on about our life, but we never sit in silence to actually hear back from him, to hear what he wants us to do, to hear where he wants us to go, right? So, yeah, no, I think I appreciate you saying that. Like I say, man, we can't even begin to really tackle some of the things if we can't admit to it or even acknowledge it. Like, yo, that's one of the struggles of mine, because you'd be surprised how much it is. It's a struggle for me too. It's been a struggle for me, in that before I ever really heard God's voice, I was always too busy trying to distract myself from my own voice, from my own thoughts, from my own hurt. I kept myself distracted for years until I had to sit with myself. I had to sit with God. And then when you sit with yourself, you then have to focus on the things that have been waiting on you. Oh yeah, it's almost like God is my father. And he's like, okay, so let's go clean this closet out together. Ooh, let's go clean this closet out together. Like, you got a closet that's full of stuff that you've been avoiding for so long. I'll help you. I'm going to open this door for you. We're going to start taking one thing at a time. We're going to clean this closet out. We're going to work through some of the pain that you've had. Oh, trust me, your 5-year-old self, he's in there. That thing that happened when you were 15, it's in there. That thing that happened when you were 21, it's in there. And as you start to work through those things, knowing that, like, okay, you're not leaving me with this stuff, are you? No, I got you. All right, okay. Because back then it was God or mental health. Now it's God and mental health. And so as you process and as you work through that stuff, it's like, I know you're right there with me to deal with this stuff. And so that's why it is so important to not just tackle the roads that God has taken us on, the path that he's taken us on, that we're both on now. But it's also important to tackle the path of, okay, how much are we dealing with our own mental health on this path, on this walk? Because God can use us, but he doesn't need us to carry that extra backpack of unhealed wounds and pain with us as we're on this path. If we choose to carry it, understand he's going to sit there and wonder why you're bringing so much extra luggage when this was a path that you didn't have to walk with all that extra luggage. So yeah, no, I think that's a big one that I am realizing as I listen to other pastors, as I listened to other therapists that are Christians, that understand the importance of our mental health and our spiritual health, and how you have to you can couple the two of those together because they're meant to be coupled together for freedom, for our freedom, for our that lens, for us to be able to see things differently now that we're not walking with all that extra weight. So
and I feel like God will put people in our lives to let us open up about that stuff, because it is so easy. And me and my friend were talking about this last night. It's so easy to like bundle stuff up, but if he didn't give me that friend that I could open up to in the car and talk about stuff that was like bothering me, I would be alone. I'd feel like I'd be alone. You know, if I didn't meet you a couple months ago, like I wouldn't feel comfortable like talking to someone on the phone. Like, I don't know if you remember that conversation, like what I said, like I meant every word. It was like I had so much weight on my mind and on my heart, and like struggling in that area of mental health and, you know, feeling worthless. And, you know, the words you said were the exact stuff I needed to hear. And I don't think if I had called anyone else, or if anyone else had called me and I'd picked up, that would have opened up like that. And I feel like you're not going to overcome those bad stuff. Because, like, I mean, I've had a really good life. I have two really loving parents. I have a good family. I have a cushiony job at camp.
Right.
I mean, I've had a good life. And,
Right.
you know, I'm very privileged, very blessed, very, very thankful. But there's some stuff in middle school. There's some stuff in high school. There's stuff in college. There's the rejections. There's the breakups. There's, you know, the broken bones. There's the hurtful words. There's, you know, constantly seeing stuff on social media telling you you're not enough because you're not 6 foot, or you're not good enough because you stumble over your words, or you say a lot in your podcast. Like all this stuff that
what?
all this stuff that would like tell you like you're not good enough. Right. And if you carry that into, and you carry those struggles into whatever you have next, or where for me, maybe the next career, maybe the next relationship, workship, whatever the case may be, like if I don't allow God to come in this room and help me clean it out a little bit before I get there into that place, or, you know, allow him to just carry me, like it's going to make things a lot more difficult on me. I know that.
Yes.
So I'm very grateful that we have a God who comes alongside us in a relationship. Like, and that's been something I've reminded myself like daily. Like, it's no longer like me throwing up like a ball on the roof and the ball coming back down with my prayers. It's like when you see that ball like be thrown up and it breaks the roof, and you can hear God and be like, okay, now I'm finally glad you like came to me with your heart, with everything. Like, not just putting on a performance to God of like, God, thank you so much for this day. Pray you keep me safe. Pray you keep my family safe. Like, that's all good stuff.
Right.
But when you get real, and you told me this a couple months ago, like, hey, don't be afraid to get real. Like, God already knows.
He already
God
knows.
knows what you're carrying. Like,
like be real with him. like, because that's what he wants from us. He wants us to be like, yo, I'm struggling down here. Like, where you at? Like, you see what I'm going through. I can't even hide this from you.
Because I had that moment. I don't know if I told you this, but it was the first night of our Mission Uprising couple months ago. I think it was a couple months ago. Yeah, it was October. And I was upset. I don't know if I ever told you this. Don't take offense to it.
No.
I was expecting something totally different from Mission Uprising, because I was expecting God to show up in the way he did in the spring. And after, you know, that first night, I was like, God, what the heck? Like, this isn't what I wanted. Like, you knew all the stuff I was carrying. This is actually really cool, because I'm seeing like it all come together now. But I'm like, I have so many questions about what to do next in life. I have so many questions about this, that, whatever. I don't want to like I don't feel like you're going to speak to me in the way I need to this weekend. And it took me like yelling, screaming in my car before I went to bed, and woke up the next morning, and I'm still feeling that way. And I think it was like lunchtime, maybe even dinner time. Like, maybe it was all the way in dinner time that second day. And I talked to somebody. I'm like, I don't know why, but I feel like God's leading me to talk to you like about this. Like, here's what's on my heart. And the thing he said was, So you think God will show up in the same exact way he did last time? You don't think he can show up in any other way? Or do you need to get out of your own way? And I was like, well, crap. I'm like, well, here I am again. And, you know, the same questions I asked in that car, and this literally just came to mind. It's kind of cool, like how God like explains puzzle pieces in the moment.
Right.
Like the same questions I asked in that car that night. I'm like frustrated. Like, I don't know if I need a new platoon group. I don't know what I need.
Right.
He's like answered in a way of just like having a friendship with you, being able to call you anytime, and being able to sit on this podcast and being able to have someone like you like pour into me, and hopefully like I can return the favor of like pouring into you. But it's really, really cool to see like how God's very intentional and very direct of like, okay, you may be struggling with your mental health, you may be struggling with this part in the past, but God's like, I need you to bring me with you. I need you to acknowledge that my presence is here for you to get the most out of this time.
That's good. That's all right. Well, you dropped the mic on that one. Yeah, no, that's real. That's
real.
real.
Podcast plug or something.
Yeah, that was. Yeah, no, that's real, man. See, that's what this is all about. Just like leaving it all on the table, so we can actually look at the pieces and just kind of like just start to see like, oh, I see what you were doing there. You know, like now the puzzle's coming together. That's good. That's good. Well, bro, listen, I appreciate you coming today. I appreciate you sitting down. I appreciate you coming all the way down to sit down with me and truly be able to bless not only me with your vulnerability, but bless so many of our listeners with your vulnerability, and truly be able to just open up about the struggles we're going through. And that, you know, you see how no matter what our ages are, we're both kind of walking the same path we got on at the beginning of this year. We're still walking that path. And even though we may say, okay, well, there's a big age gap, it's still similar. Like, yo, you too? Like, wow. And in the you twos, that's where sometimes it's like, so I'm not doing this alone. No, you're not doing this alone. That's why you got these guys to walk with you. And so I'm happy to be able to walk alongside of you. I'm happy to have you walk alongside me, because understand that iron sharpens iron. And when you're walking alongside me, you can pour into me the same way I can pour into you. And it may not be on the same day. Some days you may need me to pour more. Some days I may need to hit you up and say, bro, this slammed me today. Like literally, it slammed me today. And I just need to be reassured. I need to be encouraged, and I appreciate you for that. So with that said, bro, I'm gonna leave you with any last words or anything like that for today. And if not, I'll let you lead, let the Spirit lead you in whatever else you may want to just leave with the audience and all. Yeah, you got the mic, bro.
I got the mic.
You're on the spot, man.
I'm on the spot. Well, I didn't have anything prepared for the last words, but if I had to leave any of our listeners with something, because I don't know the ages, like who will listen. Hopefully I can have some of my friends listen.
Everybody, yeah,
but
everybody.
I feel like we're all in a place of whether we're like trying to move into the next season or, you know, being unknown of what that season is, like not feeling worthy, like not feeling good enough to apply for the job or go talk to this person, or go talk to that person, go reach out to that person, or feeling like nobody cares about me, like getting all this self-doubt and, you know, unworthiness because, you know, whether it's body image, whether it's, you know, some of your weaknesses that God can use for strengths. I just really want to encourage people that they can go to God, or they can find somebody. Maybe their parents, they can reach out to them, or a close friend. Like, God will show you like who you need to talk to and who you need to reach out with, who you need to associate with. And as long as you're allowing God to guide and lead your life, and I'll be honest, I'll probably listen to this podcast and have these words for me, if nothing else. But
yeah,
as long as you're having God in in the center and like having him guide and direct you, like you're in good hands, because nothing we have right now is of our own doing.
Right.
Not my podcast, not my radio show, not your podcast, not camp. Like none of that was of my doing. Like it's all God protecting me, guiding me, making sure I didn't wreck like the 2 or 3 times I could have come in here in the dark and in the rain. But if you feel like you're struggling, if you feel like nobody cares, if you feel like you're going through it, I mean going through it, like you're having one of those days, like please reach out to somebody, whether that's a therapist, a friend, a parent. But the one person who's never going to sleep and is always going to listen is God. And the best thing for you to do is be vulnerable and shout, scream, yell, ask questions. Why are you doing this, God? Why are you not doing it this way? Because like he already knows that. He already knows your feelings. He already knows your frustrations, your emotions. Like just tap into that, like dive into that and be vulnerable with your creator, because you told me this. Vulnerability is not a weakness, which I thought it was for the longest time. Vulnerability is a strength. It might be your greatest strength. And that has stuck with me. Like that has stuck with me for the last 2 months. And if nobody appreciates your vulnerability, fine, somebody else will. And it comes from that vulnerability, and particularly vulnerability with God, to where you can start seeing God move in these situations. And then give him glory, give him praise, because none of this is our own. We're lucky if we have 60, 70, 80 years. 75, call it quits for me.
Okay.
Not any mental health, related thing right there.
Okay.
You may want to cut that out.
It's going to be right in there.
It's going to be right in there. But however many years we're blessed with on earth, like we're not going to have it because of our own. Like God's going to carry us through it. And no matter the struggles we have, they'll be different each day.
Right.
Like just keep going, continue going, never give up, and dream big.
Yeah, I love that. You just spoke to me, bro. So whether it gets out to anybody else, that I needed that, because I don't, it's funny sometimes people think, well, I can't really sharpen an older man's sword. No, understand everything you just said was and I'm not gonna have my son sit over there and contest to it, but me and him have talked in the car in the mornings where I'm just like, yeah, man, I'm a little, I don't feel like I'm enough. I don't feel like anybody's really hearing me. I don't know if I'm really touching anybody, but like that, yeah, I appreciate that. And I hope that spoke into
and time, because I had those moments with my dad in the car, because I'd go to the community college, he would go to work, and we were literally like half a mile apart. So he would drive before he trusted me with the car. He would drive me to school and then go to work, or once he trusted me with the car, I'd drop him off at work and, go to school. But some of the best moments like you're going to have is those car rides with your dad, where your dad is vulnerable enough to talk to you, because there were so many times in the car where it was silence because none of us was willing to like break the ice. But, when you are willing to break the ice, those are some of the best conversations you can have. And now that I'm 24 years old and just, being able to go to sporting events or games, like I'm going to a Cowboys game with my dad this weekend. And, like those, man, he had a health scare a couple months ago. So that's kind of why I'm appreciating a lot more of this now. Like those are going to be the moments that you carry with you and enjoy. And like I'm talking to both of you now, like don't take any of those car rides for granted, because yeah, I can, drive to Charlotte now on my own. I can go to this place, that place on my own. But man, there is something about car rides with your dad. I'm sure, hopefully I'll have the blessing of having car rides with my son where you're going to help each other a lot. And as long as you don't look at each other as like, oh, that's my son, I can't open up to them about this. Oh, that's my dad, I can't open up to him about this. Like, if you get beyond that and realize like you are two guys striving for God in this broken world, then you can have those open conversations and talk to each other and help each other out in more ways than you can imagine. So I guess that was my parting thought.
Nah,
Let's get out of
that
here.
was real. That was real, bro.
Unless he has some questions or talk or whatever.
I love it. I love it, bro. I love it, bro. I appreciate it, man. That was real, and I appreciate that. I do. And I'm gonna hold you. I hear you every word. I hear you loud and clear, and I'm gonna keep that in mind. So I appreciate you saying that. Well, listen, I'm gonna get us up out of here now. I appreciate you guys listening today. I appreciate, my listeners here. I appreciate you all joining the community, because this is your community. This is my brother Boomer Michael's community. I appreciate him coming in today. I appreciate him sitting down with me. Can't forget about my team, my son over there on the cameras, holding it down, putting this all together for us. I look forward to the next blessing of vulnerability. I look forward to the next episode. But brother, I appreciate you being here with us. I appreciate the time. I appreciate the gift. All right, y'all be blessed.
Hey, we appreciate you listening today and hope that if you enjoyed the conversation and stories, you will subscribe and listen to past and future content. Feel free to comment, as we would love to read your comments and pray over all of our listeners. Also, please follow us on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and Facebook at God's Glory and Men's Real Stories.
We understand as men how the thought of even facing your own story and the pain and hurt that come with that is a challenging task. But we don't want you to feel like you are all alone, because you are not. God has not forgotten you or left your side, and he loves you no matter what you have done. Your healing is important to him, and we want you to have these free resources that already exist if you're considering giving up or need someone to talk to. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline number is 1-800-273-8255. If you need support but are not in crisis, consider reaching out to a warm line if you need to talk to someone. Speaking to someone on these calls is typically free and confidential, and run by people who understand what it's like to struggle with mental health. Find a local number by going to warmline.org.